Okay, a little bit different point style today. I'll be trying to make a Vendetta point. When I looked them up, it looked like they were about 2 inches long, so I need to get a flake that's going to be appropriate, although I might have to make it very tiny since I don't have a lot of California looking stone. You know what I mean? I don't have a lot of jaspers or agates. I got some heat treat that looks okay. Let's see. This point is limited to a very narrow geographic area in Oregon, I believe. We'll be on the border of Oregon and Washington State. I briefly looked at the map. Let's see. I need a larger piece than that. Let's see, maybe this will work. Let's try this one. I'm not sure if this is a heat treat or just a raw piece. Okay. So this is by request. I never heard of it until it got requested, so this is just by request. No big deal. I think this might be raw, which is going to be interesting. But steel will power through raw stuff pretty easily. The issue, like everything, is can I get it thin? Although these points had elliptical cross sections in some cases. Elliptical just means thick, in other words. Relatively thick. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Hopefully I won't break it right out of the starting gate. Because the most force that I'm going to apply to it is right here in the beginning. Trying to get rid of that lump or that turtleback. I got some interesting questions this time around. Some guy was curious, or just thinking about why would you use an abrader to dull the edges. Is it possible to actually sharpen stone the way you sharpen steel? Yeah, you can by grinding, but usually, at least in the Americas, flint was not ground down to make sharp edges. You'll see that sometimes with axe heads. The blade is sharpened, but it's not sharpened in the way that an arrowhead would be sharp. It's just sharp enough to cut into wood. When you sharpen an axe head made of stone, you're just grinding in the edge. The reason why it doesn't get that sharp is because it's brittle. As you're trying to sharpen it, the very thin edge will break, even if you're extremely careful. So you can't make a very fine edge like you can with steel. Steel is more flexible. Anyway. Some interesting questions. Let's see what else. One basic question is how much, well, I wasn't asked this, I asked the other guy. How much do you think culture affects the lithic technology? 0? Culture affects it? 0? No, it's not 0. Is it just barely above 0? Just barely? Or does culture have a lot to do with it? Or maybe it's somewhere in between, yeah. If it's significant, I told him, if it's significant, then I'm interested in it. I'm interested in how significant is it, and if it's very significant, how does it affect it exactly? How does the culture affect lithic reduction? If it is a significant amount and you're ignoring it as an archaeologist, or you don't know how to deal with cultural issues when it comes to technologies, you're missing a lot. Right? I think. Aren't you missing a lot if you ignore something that is significant? I think that's what that means. How can we know? How can we know what used to be the cultures? How do we know? Well, we can't really know. How do we know anything? What's the secret? Everybody raise your hand, or raise your hand if you know. How do you know something? What is the truth? What's the secret to knowing that? You listen to Pontius Pilate and say, what is the truth? What is it? Really, what is it? You know, implying that truth is subjective, right? Truth is what is left standing after the tests. Right? Right. Truth is what's left standing after you test it. Now, if you cannot test it, if there's no way to test it, there's no way to know that it is true. If you can test it, and it holds up over and over and over again to many tests, and you're legitimately trying to test it instead of doing fake tests on it that make it seem like you're testing it, if you really are sincerely testing it and it stands up to tests, well, then that's the best way to verify something. Test it. How do you test cultural influences? Well, you test it on modern humans. It's the only thing we got. Can't test it on dead people. So you test it on modern humans. The closer in time you get, or the less far back you go in time, the more relevant that is, right? But that's all we have. We have to test it on modern humans. Luckily, modern humanity goes back about 60,000 to 100,000 years ago, something like that. That's a long ways. So we can test it on modern humans. But this is the problem. We cannot test everything that could have gone on back then. Can't test slavery. It's illegal now. You can't see how it affected the lithic technology. Can't test cannibalism. Maybe some points were used for hunting people. Can't test all that. What can you test? Well, not much actually. A lot of things nowadays are illegal. You can't. There are certain ways to hunt. There are certain legal weapons for hunting. Like many states do not allow barbed points. So how can we test the effectiveness of a barbed point on animals when it can't be used for good reason? Can't use it on people either. How can you test it on someone unless you have a volunteer to take a shot with a barbed point? I don't think there's anyone out there that wants to do that. You can pretty much see what happens from similar types of things. Accidents, workplace accidents with barbed objects, that kind of thing, but you can't directly do the tests. Now, do we know that there was warfare going on? Yes, we do. How do we know that? Well, I'm napping a point that supposedly was used for warfare, the Vendetta point. Right? Where do they get that information from? I think they get that from the native cultures. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I haven't researched this point all that much. Just enough to get the general shape. But if that's the culture, it was used for warfare, then it has everything to do with how this looks. The look of the point is part of the lithic technology. It's a major significant part. The way the point looks is a major significant part of the lithic technology. So there you go. That's one instance. Now, were these intentionally made from very colorful cherts or agates? Could be. When they didn't need to be, maybe they would search for a special material, just like I did. Because you don't want your war points to be ugly. I don't think. Maybe that's not a good example. But I've got a book on ceremonial warfare, ritual warfare. Yes, there was such a thing, or there is such a thing. Usually it's associated with very primitive cultures, maybe even gangs, modern gangs, that kind of thing. Ritual fighting to prove manhood or some other thing. Rites of passage. Do you think lithic technology is not tied to rites of passage? And does the rite of passage affect the lithic technology? Who gets to do what? Or you're not blah 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 unless you can do such and such with the stone. Fill in the blanks. How do we know that's true? Well, just look and see in the YouTube comments of various videos if the point looks a certain way with certain types of flaking, people start responding with awe and wonderment. What does that lead to? It leads to the napper doing more of the same, even though he doesn't have to. For functionality's sake, right? He likes the praise, the sounds of awe and wonderment at the shape of the flakes, the types of flakes, the flaking pattern. You have to develop a whole technology and a whole mindset around certain flaking patterns because there's awe and wonderment among the observers. That's a modern thing, part of modern humanity. You think that can extend back in time as well? Probably. Should we classify point styles according to this awe and wonderment? Well, there's a good question, because some archaeologists are classifying points based on flake scars that look just like other points, but they're not classified as the same point, because this point on the, let's say this point on the right, pretend that's a point. The point on the right has no fancy flaking, but the point on the left does have fancy flaking. So they classify them as different types of points. Why? Because the fancy flaking produces awe and wonderment. So it must be a different type. Well, why does, ask yourself, why do you think archaeologists, some of them, consider that to be significant enough to classify it as a different point? Because obviously they think it's a major part of the lithic technology. Otherwise they wouldn't classify it as a different point. Examples? St. Mary's Hall, classified primarily on the flaking, when the base and blade characteristics are very similar to other points. But it's not considered one of the other points because the other points don't have that type of flaking. That's one example I can think of off the top of my head. There's probably dozens more like that. Well, maybe not dozens, but that's too much of a bold statement. I don't even know. I know that there's more than one. So what do I think the fancy flaking is due to? Is it cultural? I think yes, but the one thing that they often don't consider is it's just a matter of skill. As you get better and better at making certain points, you tend to run parallel flaking as you get better and better, just because it's easier. Your subconscious will take over and it'll start doing parallel flaking, but you need to do lots and lots and lots of pressure flaking for that to happen. So that's probably what happened in the past. These nappers were doing lots and lots and lots of pressure flaking, and they ended up, the final result being lots of parallel flaking, side by side, very consistent. Not like what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to get rid of that turtleback. Not much success. I might not be able to get rid of it, but we'll see. Anyway, if you're not thinking about the cultural aspect, you're missing out. But don't let it blind you, because that happens also. The extremes are where the trouble is. right? And most everything, the extremes are where you run into trouble. Okay. I don't know. I might be able to get it fairly thin, but not all the way. This is a raw piece of stone, by the way. Very, very hard. You can't tell how hard I'm hitting this with the flaker, but it's really, really hard. Hard enough to break it with each strike. But I've broken enough that I know the limits of the stone pretty well. I'm trying not to break it. Once you get the turtleback low enough, you can start sending flakes over it. I just got to get that turtleback low enough, just like I did up near the top. I can start doing pressure flakes on that. But it's got to be low enough to respond to the flaking. If it's too steep, the flakes will stop. The pressure flakes will stop because they don't have enough pressure to go over the top. Or they don't have enough force to go over the top. Not with something this tough, this small and difficult to hold, and with the amount of force I can generate with just that simple little flaker. It's just a simple little flaker that's getting worn down to the point where I got to replace that nail. So easy to replace that nail. I think that's a 16 penny, but I still haven't done it. I got the box of nails right there. I'm sitting on the box that has the box of nails in it, and I haven't done it yet. All right, let's see if I can get rid of that mess right there with a pressure flake. From this platform here, I got to make sure I can seat onto the platform without it crushing. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes the raw stone is tough enough to where you don't have to worry about the crushing. But this one is kind of crushy. So yeah, I picked out that little step fracture. Just picked it out. But I still have the lump there. I may be able to run a flake here across the lump. But this is what I'm trying to build up. If I can push off here, I may be able to do that. I didn't have to pick off that one step fracture or that undetached flake there yet. I could have just concentrated here and pushed that off, and that would take care of that as well. But I took care of it first just to see what it looked like. Still kind of crushy on the edge. It's all crushed in there. Might give me trouble later. Alright, so I'm going to try to push off on this with a lot of force. Make sure I'm seated. Okay, not too bad. I'm going to try to pick that off now. I'm going to have to push off a pressure flake to get rid of that. I can't just pick it off like I did the other one. Let's see. By doing this, I'm making sure there's no real gentle edge. See that? I'm pushing down, make sure there's nothing that'll be crushing when I push. I'll go kind of high on this one. Pushing. I got most of it. I can go over to this side. Getting rid of anything that could crush if I push on the edge or push on that seat on the edge. It's a little seat on the edge. It's like if you're watching a ball game and you have to sit on the edge, make sure there's a little seat that you can sit on. Nothing that will be like Wile E. Coyote on the edge of a cliff and fall off because it's too delicate, right? Make sure you can sit on it with the pressure flaker. Don't be like Wile E. Coyote and step on the edge that crumbles. One of the cartoons I grew up with. There it goes. Try for another one up here. This one's already pretty solid. That platform or that ledge was already pretty solid. So damage control success on that side. Alright, so most of this stuff is removed, but I still got a big old lump. Now with a Vendetta point, it's almost like 2 points in one. So right here, I can start notching it on the side here, and I might be able to get to that mass because I'm going to lose width here. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to attack it first from this side because it's more convex. See how this is dished in on that side? I don't want to push off flakes from here. I'd rather push off flakes from this side. It's more rounded and convex. So I'm going to remove the edge from this side first. There's no shortcuts. I got to be careful that I don't blast off too much of the edge. Is it translucent? Yeah, it's pretty translucent. Okay, good. Alright, so taking back this edge, I had to anyway. This is nasty too, this little concrete area. It's good to get rid of that, although it runs pretty deep. Unfortunately, you see now I've got a ledge that I can put in the indirect percussion flaker and maybe get to that turtleback. Cross my fingers because this is where they break. Alright, where's the flaker? Steel bar 3/8, mild steel. For vital, very important hits, you got to make sure the steel is clean. No chips inside the tip. Same goes for antler. Make sure there's no chips. No chips in the tips. Alright, it's very narrow. I got it. It's very thick. I have a chance of breaking the whole thing. So I'll cross my fingers. I won't bite into it too much, but I can't hold back too much either. In order to remove turtlebacks, you have to be aggressive. That was okay. Not that great. Not too bad, I suppose. I might be able to do the rest only with pressure. That did skin off a little bit of that turtleback. I might be able to get some from the other side. Did it do it? Oh, almost. It almost ran past halfway. I think I can do the rest with pressure. That would have been good if it was just 1/16 more of an inch. It would have taken off a little bit more. But I think, yep, I think I can do it from here. All right, next segment.